Travel is more than just ticking off countries. It's about the people, the culture, the food, the moments. I'm Pippa Hudson, and on Wonder the World, I invite you to join me every week as we explore destinations both near and far, with the help of fellow adventurers who share their unique travel stories. Listen to my podcast wherever you get them.
And now, The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA Corporate and Investment Banking. ABSA is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025. Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Grootes. Glad you're with us this evening. Plenty going on today. Very busy day, of course, of corporate news today. A lot of it around results. We'll speak to the CEO of Vodacom, Shamil Joosub, in just a moment. Also, of course, this evening we'll speak to the CEO of Netcare in just a moment. We will also be speaking to the CEO of Famous Brands. Lots of talk about a constrained consumer environment and tough competition. Extraordinary stories coming out of Astral around how competitive the chicken market is. The news that affected me personally in a way over the weekend was hearing about the passing of Issie Kirsh. And I know you've probably heard some tributes to him being paid throughout the day. We'll continue those and we'll hear from him as a business person. My memory of Issie Kirsh is someone who is sort of a legend in Prime Media. He's the one who formed Prime Media. He's legendary in it. And then, of course, Radio 702 and Cape Talk from there, along with, of course, KFM and 947. The first time I met him, he actually came round to my desk. He was already, of course, a mature man at the time. I was very young. And all he wanted was some help for another worker he had noticed wasn't feeling very well. And that is the kind of story that you remember about someone who founded a company, was a former chair by then. All he was worried about was not himself, not anything else. He was worried about an employee who wasn't feeling very well. And that kind of, I think, is some of the stories I've been hearing sort of on the corridors, people of my generation and before here at Prime Media talking about. I think the other big thing that he showed everybody when it comes to radio, and this will just be my 2 cents worth, is if you want to own and manage a radio station, go for it. Appoint people to be in charge of the content and leave them to it. Don't interfere. That was something that he made sure was in the DNA of Prime Media. Lots going on in international markets today, still, of course, because of the Trump effect. Scott Bessent, for example, telling Walmart that they must just eat the tariff. In other words, keep their prices the same despite the fact they'll be making less or no profit. And I imagine in a market as competitive as the US, selling goods at not just at a discount, but at a loss. You do wonder how long this is going to go on for. Well, some of the big CEOs in the US are going to come together and speak all at the same time. Already Amazon, for example, has buckled from Trump's pressure when they wanted to put a Trump cost in their prices, a Trump tariff cost or a tariff cost in their prices. Absolutely no reason why they shouldn't. Clearly, one of the richest people in the world, Jeff Bezos, decided that for other reasons he wasn't going to do it. But I do wonder at which point the CEOs in the US are going to come together on this. They certainly have a common interest. Good to hear from you this evening on 011 8830 702 021 446 0567 and voice notes tonight on 072 702 1702.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, a strong set of earnings from Vodacom for the year to the end of March. Normalized group service revenue up by 11.2%. A prediction also that it will increase its core profitability over the medium term. Says a big surge in earnings from Egypt helping its results. Still having some problems, as you can imagine, in markets like the DRC and Mozambique, both of them being affected by sort of political issues. Shamil Joosub is the Vodacom Group CEO. Shamil, good evening. Really appreciate your time on The Money Show. Your Egyptian unit now accounts for almost a quarter of your revenue. How important is that market becoming for you?
Good evening, Stephen, and thanks for having me on the show. It's really become a really good, important part of our growth factors going forward. A few years ago, we decided that we needed to diversify both geographically and deepen our product diversification. And I think in both contexts, it's working really well. So, Egypt part becoming a more material part of our earnings. And also, when we look forward, it's going to become an even more material part, given the growth factor there of about 20% plus for the next 5 years in EBITDA.
Here, your service revenue in South Africa growing by 2.3%, but your data traffic in South Africa up by 36%. So the volume of data that people are using per handset, if you like, is going up very quickly. Do you know what people are using that data for? I mean, streaming's been around for a while. AI can use more data. Is it for something else?
Well, I think you've got a mix of fixed wireless becoming bigger. So you've got your fixed wireless access, and of course, having that part growing, and that's bigger consumptions. And then, the average customer is always spending more. So as the networks get faster, you're also getting customers consuming more data, and it's everything from TV to social media. So and then of course gaming is becoming a bigger factor as well. But things like TikTok are growing, and this whole concept of reels are growing quite nicely.
Interesting to see how something like TikTok can have such a big impact. As I say, the volume of data going through your network quickly, you obviously have to upgrade your networks on a regular basis. I think people now just presume that the service they get on their phone will be exactly the same as the service they get through fiber at home, for example. Do you think that'll ever be reflected in pricing, where mobile data will come close to fiber data in terms of pricing?
I think mobile prices are coming down all the time, and that's why you're not seeing that 36% revenue convert into traffic convert into revenue, because the rate is coming down by almost 30%. So effectively, your effective rates keep coming down, and that's so the prices of mobile are going down consistently, and so that's one of the reasons why you don't see all this growth or this big growth despite the traffic growth. It's never quite the same. It'll never a mobile service will never quite be fiber, because in fiber you have an unlimited service, whereas mobile will always be a contended service. So you're sharing that capacity on a site with multiple users.
Okay, so for technical reasons, it'll never be the same. You've asked the Competition Commission for permission to work with MTN to ensure your networks are more resilient. I presume this is about power and backup power. What are you asking for?
What we're doing across our markets, including South Africa, is to look at where can we share more, and where can we optimize. Because you've got, so for power as an example, you have a lot of generators and a lot of batteries that you need to deploy per site. So if we can share with MTN and also with the other operators, very, very welcome to share. We're doing this across our markets to see where can we share on what I call the non-competitive elements, the fiber into the site, the tower itself, and so on. And then that allows you to compete on the front end.
You've had a little bit of a tough time with competition regulators, the massive fiber deal, for example, where it's kind of a similar thing. They turned you down there. You are appealing that, of course. Do you think they'll listen to you here? I mean, they're not exactly the same thing. You're not asking for exactly the same thing. There might be a similarity or two.
Not quite, because I think this one is very different from the perspective that it's there to optimize. And if you're optimizing, essentially, that should help you to reduce your costs, and also that benefit should come through in your pricing and so on. So, I think the more you can optimize, the better it is. And so they shouldn't have a problem versus the other, the massive deal where, to be honest with you, I think it just got it wrong.
You're still very confident then of your appeal?
Well, we're going to appeal. For me, the money's in the bank. I think it's more a travesty for South Africa because we can always find other opportunities to invest in because we need fiber needs across the continent. But of course, one sentimental about South Africa being our home market. So you want to invest here first. But, the opportunity, the 10,000 jobs, the 1 million rural homes that would be covered, the 10 billion additional investment. So, you were looking at about a 25 billion investment into the fiber part, which is the capex plus the 14 billion investment into the entity, and would have changed the face of fiber in South Africa quite dramatically, given that South Africa is lagging in fiber rollout and fiber take-up.
Shamil Jusub, thanks very much indeed. Strong words indeed. The CEO of the Vodacom Group.
7:02. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
A comment today from the CEO of the chicken producer Astral, Gary Arnold, that for the 6 months to the end of March, the company was actually effectively subsidizing the cost of producing chicken. That's because the price of maize has become quite high. There's also, and this may be the main reason, so much competition. It's a very competitive environment. Well, Gary Arnold is on the line for you now. Gary, good evening. That's a big point to make. Clearly, some of your costs have gone up. What's led to the situation in which you say you're subsidizing the cost of producing chicken?
Stephen, thank you. Good evening to you and your listeners. Yes, Stephen, if you look at the 6 months in context and you compare it to the 6 months in the prior year, we sit with an environment or had an environment where feed prices, poultry feed prices had increased. This on the back of higher maize prices. I mean, the El Nino weather patterns and the drought we faced as a country last year is not new news. That had a significant impact on our local maize crop. So, we saw a much smaller amount of maize produced through that crop, 12.7 million tons. So very tight supplies into the market on that old season crop, which led to an increase in feed prices. At the same time, inflationary cost increases coming through, minimum wage increased, energy costs going up, and we still face the interruptions in power and water at a municipal level, unfortunately. So those, these days, we call it an embedded cost. It's there, but still a significant amount of money running in the region of 10 million rand a month. So, those cost pressures increase and ramp up. And then we had selling price deflation through last year, particularly in the frozen chicken category. A lot of retailer promotional activity, a very competitive environment, as you've stated now in your introduction. So selling prices under pressure. We went into this new financial year and this past first half that we're reporting on with lower selling prices than the prior year, but increased costs. So, subsidizing the cost of producing chicken and margins, which were already quite thin for the second half of our last financial year at 0.2% broiler net margins. Those so thin that they just disappeared, and margins at minus 1.1% for the period we're reporting on. Certainly not sustainable by any means. Stephen.
No, I'm sure. I mean, can't go on much longer. The competitive environment, where's that competition coming from? Is it other chicken producers here who maybe don't have to deal with the Lekwa municipalities you have to deal with? Is it your friends in Brazil?
No, so not imports. Stephen, the competitive environment is one, firmly fixed in local fundamentals. I think last year, there was after the bird flu outbreak in 2023, all producers restocked. And in fact, last year, from June onwards, we saw new record high poultry production levels in the country, and notwithstanding the fact that Astral at the time had cut back marginally because of our own stock levels. So, a lot of chicken around last year towards the end of the year. Pricing, again, as I've said earlier on, under pressure. So, one has to remain competitive in the market. We price takers, unfortunately, on frozen chicken, which has become a commodity in the South African context. So price takers then in the retail sector and other sectors. So a lot of pressure from that point of view. But, pleased to say that going into this into the new year and the 6 months ahead of us now, our stock levels well under control. In fact, we sold a lot of volumes. Our volumes were up for the 6 months. So it wasn't as if poultry volume sales were down. Sales volumes were up for the period that we're reporting on now, just at the wrong price, Stephen. So, looking ahead, our stock levels well under control. We've in fact increased our production. We made a decision in December to place extra birds or additional broilers on the ground. So we're increasing production volumes. And there has been an opportunity to look at, getting some selling price relief in the market, given better supply and demand balance. So certainly looking to cover those input costs going forward.
10 million a month is lost to you simply because of the problems with municipalities. And I presume, and I referred to the Lekwa municipality where I think one of your major production hubs is. A lot of talk from the politicians about fixing councils. There was more talk today from the Cooperative Governance Minister about it. Are you seeing any impact on any of that at all? Has anything got better from a municipal standpoint for you?
Stephen, you might remember that quite topical for us at the time was the issues that we faced in Standerton. Within that municipality, we've got a large poultry processing plant there and a lot of farms around that area, poultry farms. So we support about 3,500 jobs directly in the Standerton area. And, that municipality faced numerous issues with infrastructure collapse, roads in a terrible state, water. We're having to supply half of our own water needs in the town by trucking that water from the Vaal River, which is pretty much just 6 kilometers away from the plant. So not able to receive all that water through the municipal works. Electricity supply disruptions in the municipality have increased in frequency. That's got more to do with the infrastructure, local infrastructure maintenance of that, than to do with national supply of power, although Eskom have constrained supply to Standerton because they're not able to pay Eskom their outstanding electricity bill. That's the municipality. So, unfortunately, one has to say that our troubles continue there. And, there was a financial recovery plan that was worked on by the municipality. It just always lacked the funds to implement. So we once again going back to Treasury and the presidency and appealing and saying, look, all the work that was put in, the administrators that were put in place in Standerton and this financial recovery plan that was drafted, it hasn't amounted to much because we're still having to look after ourselves, as do many businesses in that municipality. So quite a concern still, Stephen.
Gary Arnold, thank you very much indeed. The CEO at Astral Foods.
7:02. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
There was confirmation over the weekend that the person who founded the company that owns this radio station, Issie Kirsh, has passed away at the age of 90. He started Radio 702 back in 1980, then pioneered the talk radio format in South Africa at a time when the apartheid government really didn't want people to talk to each other. John Robbie was someone who played a really important role during that time. I remember him hosting Talk at 10. That was moved to Talk at 9. And, of course, presented the breakfast show on Radio 702 for many years. John, good evening. Wonderful to talk to you again. Welcome to The Money Show. How will you remember Issie Kirsh?
Oh, gosh, how long have you got, Stephen? First of all, a great pleasure to be here. I was at the funeral today, and I think what I remember most is what Yossi Goldman, who, of course, was the 702's radio rabbi many years ago, and he stood up and said, look, if I was talking to a business school or a university now, I would talk about Issie Kirsh's incredible business acumen. I would talk about the dream he had, the foresight, talking radio, etc., etc., etc. But he said, I'm not. I'm going to talk about the man, because the man was such a gentleman. And that's how I remember him. I didn't know him that well. I worked for 702 for 30 years, can you believe it? And I can't say I knew Issie particularly well, but he was always hugely friendly. He was always very, very supportive. And his first question always was, how's the family? So an absolute legend in the game, and it was an honor to know him.
He seemed to have a real passion for radio, and yet he didn't interfere in the product. He never touched the content. There were people, program managers, that was their job. But, in terms of someone actually who had to deal with the consequences of what people said, perhaps what you said from time to time, John, he didn't seem to interfere.
Yeah, he did once, only once, when I was in the early days of Talk at 10. And that horrible, horrible, controversial so-called historian, David Irvine, was due to come. He was the one who was the Holocaust denialist, and really, really a horrible man, I think, has been exposed. And of course, Issie was a very devout Jewish person, and, there were all sorts of tensions surrounding David Irvine being on, and he actually put pressure on to stop me, and Mike Nick Wills, who was the boss at the time, said, look, John, I think we have to respect that, and you're not going on. I was furious about it at the time, but I can respect the decision was made with the utmost thought behind it, and I wouldn't hold that against him. But otherwise, I mean, I remember we had the Wit Wolfe on one week, Barnes Stradom, who murdered black people because they were black, and a week later we had Robert McBride, the Magoo bomber, who murdered people in that bomb down in Durban as supposedly part of the struggle. Those caused huge controversy at the time, and many, many people, some within the radio station, felt that we shouldn't go ahead with him. And Issie Kirsh said, you go ahead with him, do your best, and afterwards came up after both of them and said, fascinating interviews. I'll never forget that.
John Robbie, thank you very much indeed. Former breakfast show host at Radio 702. We'll pay more tribute. We'll talk about the business life of Issie Kirsh after 7 o'clock. We'll hear from Jenny Chris Williams as well.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Sia Mbata's investment analyst at the Old Mutual Investment Group. Sia, good evening. So many corporate results today. Re-Energen reporting a bigger loss than they had before. Still major issues there, of course.
Good evening to everyone listening. So Re-Energen is quite interesting. So they are a dual-listed natural gas and helium company, and this week's results paint quite a sobering picture of a business that's really under a significant amount of strain. So they've reported about 230 million rand worth of losses, which is nearly double last year's losses. And it's quite interesting because revenue grew about 80%, but the actual scale and quantum of costs absolutely dwarfed it. So they're under pressure from a cost perspective, but they're also under pressure from a production perspective. So with regards to the LNG production, they're running at about 8 to 9 tons per day, and that's significantly below the 52 tons targets. And they haven't started production on the helium yet. So company that's really facing difficult headwinds. The share price is down 90% from 2022. And auditors have flagged material uncertainty around Re-Energen's ability to continue as an ongoing concern. And it is concerning.
I mean, obviously, prices are going to reflect that. Process, it's a cash deal they're offering, 4 billion euros for JustEatTakeaway.com. 63% on the share premium, 63% premium on the share price. That's quite a number.
It's quite hefty, sure. They're not necessarily bargain hunting, but I think this is a step in a particular direction that's also quite interesting. They are looking, I guess, with the last announcement from last week on the Despaga acquisition as well as the Just Eat Takeaway. It seems as though they're looking to take on a more hands-on approach as opposed to just being a holding company. Of course, this brand is not new information. They're just reaffirming the deal. It was initially flagged earlier, but this latest update confirms the timeline as well as the process and steps that are going to be taken towards completion. And the strategic rationale remains unchanged. Process are looking to scale up their global operations, particularly in food delivery, expanding their footprint, and Just Eat plugs in quite nicely into that portfolio.
And very quickly, Netcare, their headline earnings per share up 20%.
Sure. Netcare is slowly ticking away, and they're doing quite well, beating earnings expectations. So earnings, the result was quite solid. Revenue grew about 5%. Total patient days grew about 1.5%. But the key thing there was occupancy remained stable, so that's quite good. It shows good momentum heading into the second half. The standout division was really the non-acute division, where we saw revenue grew about 19% and EBITDA margins about 13%. So significantly ahead of where investors had anticipated. And with Netcare, the key thing there is the journey around digitization and AI. And they're looking to implement this in order to be in order to differentiate themselves relative to the rest of the market. So really great results, solid performance. They've been really great on cost control.
Sia Mbata, thank you. We'll have to leave it there. Really appreciate the time. Investment analyst at the Old Mutual Investment Group. We'll hear from the CEO of Netcare in a few moments, just after 6:30.
Travel is more than just ticking off countries. It's about the people, the culture, the food, the moments. I'm Pippa Hudson, and on Wonder the World, I invite you to join me every week as we explore destinations both near and far with the help of fellow adventurers who share their unique travel stories. Listen to my podcast wherever you get them.
The Money Show.
With Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
And DSTV channel 856.
Well, I'd like to know from you how often you go out to eat. I don't mean kind of lunchtime. I mean with your partner, maybe with the family, where you go and why you go. And if I may also ask another question, how important are potato chips to your choice? Because potato chips having, it seems, a material impact on the results from famous brands. But I'd really like to hear where you go. 011 8830 702 and 021 4460 567. So famous brands, their operating profit up by 12.6% in the year to the end of February. Also pointing out, though, that the amount of money you have to spend eating out is severely curtailed and that there's very fierce competition for your eating out rand. The CEO at Famous Brands is Darren Healy. Darren, good evening. Good to have you with us on The Money Show. A tough environment you're competing in. You refer to how much more advertising you have to do, how many more promotions you have to do. Are they effective? Do they keep people coming out?
Good evening, Stephen. Thank you. Yeah, look, they are a characteristic of the industry. So we are an industry that constantly needs to put ourselves out there. So it's not unique to us. But yeah, look, if you get the wrong message out there, you certainly can feel it. And right now, consumers are on high alert for value, and that's the key message.
Are you finding people, I mean, you have brands sort of across the price range. Are people changing where they eat from a sort of more expensive outlet to a cheaper one?
Look, there's still people that are discerning. What we are seeing, though, is that people are prepared to do that, or even in the upper end of the market where they are going out, they're probably a little more cautious around what they spend. In other words, they don't want to give up the occasion, but they may give up, the bottle of wine or, whatever it may be, dessert. But keeping, they've kept their budget the same, and with food inflation, obviously putting that pressure on, something's got to give. So that the occasion is important to them, and we will talk to that in giving them what they're looking for. But they control the spend.
So in other words, you might have some of your restaurants in the segment with the same number of customers coming through, but sort of less revenue per customer, or the same revenue as you had 2 years ago.
Yeah, that is a characteristic, although there has been some drop-off in some occasions in feet, but generally that is the trend. I mean, obviously we have a basket of brands, but typically, that is happening more than anything else, yep.
One thing that affected you was the amount of potato chips you sold. One of your competitors came back into the market in a big way. How important are potato chips to your business? I imagine you sell a large volume every week. And I know for some people, I'm a bit picky about my chips. Some do it better than others, and I will decide where we're going to eat based on that.
Yeah, we quite new to the retail market, so that's where we've taken some pain. I mean, we continue to supply restaurants with a high-quality product grown in the Sunveld in the Western Cape. But yeah, so from a retail perspective is where we've taken the pressure. And yeah, some of it is some learnings that we've encountered. And, it is, again, like anything, a price-sensitive market too. So you've got to make sure you get your pricing right in retail. So we've had a few learnings coming out of that. But it's certainly not a quality issue at all. I mean, we have a great product. But potato availability does complicate the South African market as well, and there has been in the past year difficulty around potato availability.
You point out that you're still innovating. You're looking at developing the technology to basically produce a better product and better services. Is some of that around the sort of technicalities of home deliveries, very competitive at the moment? Are there other technologies that you're improving in your restaurants themselves, around the food, around the service perhaps?
It's more around our holistic restaurant system. So, we've got different pieces of technology, but they're all quite expensive in their own right. So we're trying to, bring everything under sort of single roof. Probably not going to happen that way. But a lot of it is around what we call the self-service terminals in restaurants in QSR. More than anything else is probably the key focus. The delivery side is running well, but again, we are leveraging that technology better in the back end by bringing in delivery hubs, which essentially leverage the cost structure a bit more. And then, of course, also bring technology into manufacturing, where we manufacture some of the restaurant products. Every industry is evolving, and even that part of the business is evolving.
Developing your menus. I mean, burgers have probably been a staple of fast food since fast food was sort of invented, okay? But tastes do change. There are more vegetarian options available now. Are you seeing your menus moving in a particular direction? Are you seeing any trends that are kind of asserting themselves? Or, I mean, would something that sold in the 1980s still sell quite well today?
I'd say it's evolution rather than revolution, to coin a phrase. I mean, there's definitely been a slow and gradual change. If I showed you menus from 10 years ago, you would see a distinct difference evolving over time, particularly around health options, portion sizes, red versus white meat. But look, I can say that a cheeseburger is still the classic and the favorite out there across the industry. So there's some classics that don't change, but there has been, drift and change, and so different options coming in. And of course, size of portions is critical around value, but also just more, people being more conscious around what they eat and how much they eat.
And people eating sort of less red meat generally, I presume.
In the SA context, chicken is still a big favourite. So there is a trade-off and an interplay, but as an example, something like lamb is just almost out of the affordability equation now. So, yeah, definitely the case. And, red meat has become more expensive over time. So, definite change. Chicken definitely growing in popularity, across the board.
Darren Healy, thanks very much indeed. Really appreciate it. CEO at Famous Brands.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Well, the private healthcare group Netcare reporting it's still dealing with a higher level of average case severity than in 2019. In other words, it's dealing with average cases that are more severe than they were before the pandemic. Obviously, quite a difficult number to get to. The company's reporting its headline earnings per share were up by 20%. Dr. Richard Friedland is the chief executive of Netcare. Richard, good evening. Always appreciate your time. Is there any particular reason why your average case severity may still be higher than it was before the pandemic? Are people maybe only coming to hospital if it's more serious?
Well, it's a combination of a number of factors. Good evening to you, Stephen, and an excellent question. One is we are seeing an out-migration to day clinics of the simpler day cases, although we still continue to do that, which tends to, we tend to see the higher end, more acute and more complicated cases in our hospital network. We also run the largest level 1 accredited trauma network across the country. And as we pointed out, we're seeing a much higher impact of the burden of disease. In our presentation, we showed the increase in chronic diseases, not just in old people, but certainly in younger people, a massive increase in cancer prevalence across all age groups, and a very significant increase in mental health prevalence. It's becoming one of the top 3 causes of disability in South Africa and globally. So there are a number of reasons to suggest that we're not getting more healthy. In fact, we're getting sicker, so to speak.
Your primary care division, you said medical and dental visits are down 0.9%, and that's because people don't have money. Could there be a link between those two things? People have less money when they have a very sort of a non-severe symptom. As a result, they wait too long, and then they end up presenting with a very severe symptom?
Well, it certainly could be that, but there's also a positive element that I think a lot of people felt they coped very well during the COVID pandemic, notwithstanding the terrible tragedy of losing lives and loved ones. And in that period, they learned how to self-medicate quite effectively. And I think when you look at the enormous strain the consumer is under at the moment, given our environment, there's a huge pressure on disposable income. I do think we've got to change the way we deliver health, both in South Africa and globally. And I do think that, we have to change the way we approach patients, because unless we are taking co-responsibility and we're becoming active and equal partners in our healthcare, we're going to continue to see these trends continue, particularly in terms of chronic illnesses. And we are absolutely focused in Netcare in addressing that issue within our strategy.
You mentioned the robust demand for mental health services. And again, I wonder if something shifted during the pandemic. More people are prepared to talk about it. More public people are prepared to talk about it. It's becoming understood that this is something many, I would actually go as far as to say most people will go through at some point in their lives. And that maybe is encouraging people to come forward. That's one explanation. The other, of course, is that South Africa is a very tough country to live in, and many people may just be suffering the result of that. How do you see it?
I think all of the above is correct. I mean, I think that there's been a destigmatization of mental health care challenges, which has helped people come forward. But I do think there's a scourge, given the, socioeconomic, macroeconomic, socio-political challenges we have in South Africa. But Stephen, I would hasten to add this is a global phenomenon. And the real tragedy is we're seeing this in young people and young teenagers and children on an alarming rate. And again, it's something we've got to tackle as a country, as a society, and as healthcare workers.
You mentioned that doctors will be using generative AI, natural language processing tools to streamline the publication of large-scale clinical research. You're very involved in that. Obviously, that's the way things are going, and there's huge potential in using AI. AI can still cause problems. It can hallucinate. Elon Musk's Grok was talking nonsense last week. Are you able to ensure that doesn't have an impact on skewing research in the wrong way or sort of coming to conclusions that simply aren't true? I presume, I'm sure there must be very important safeguards in place.
Absolutely. And you raise an extremely important point. We have a very robust AI governance council in place at Netcare. We test every one of the algorithms and solutions, and we make sure that it's accurate. We've just introduced a solution to predict bloodstream infections in ICU. We published it this year. It's been approved by the regulatory authorities, and it can predict sepsis or bloodstream infections 8 to 10 hours before and save lives. It's extraordinary. But we conduct an ongoing observational study to check our results and make sure, as you say, there's no hallucination within this machine learning program.
And obviously,
as an example.
No, it's incredible, the research that is being done. And as you say, that will definitely save lives.
We're producing over 50 gigabytes of clinical data. We're the only healthcare provider doing that here from a provider perspective. And we think it's an enormous tool for promoting research and better outcomes and safer outcomes for patients for all doctors in South Africa.
And very quickly, the NHI, you're still very confident of your case with other parties against the government?
Well, we are, but Stephen, that's not the solution we're seeking. We're seeking a collaborative partnership. We can't wait 15 years for a solution. Healthcare is in crisis in this country. The public sector is facing enormous challenges. Just look at the Ombudsman's report out of Rahima Musa or Helen Joseph, the crisis that they're not paying doctors. They're refusing to pay overtime, the long queues. The ordinary man in the street, the disenfranchised individual, needs a solution now. And the private sector believes in collaboration and cooperation with government. We can achieve it. We don't want to take the low road and fight this out in court. And it really is in the hands of our president to galvanize all of those willing to assist to find a solution to universal health care. We need it, and we need it now.
Dr. Richard Friedland, thank you. CEO of Netcare. You with The Money Show, 7 o'clock.
And now, The Money Show.
With Stephen Grootes on 702.
Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025. Good evening. Welcome to the program. I'm Stephen Grootes. In a few moments, we will be speaking to Paul Nkuna, who was someone who knew Issie Kirsh from a business point of view. Issie Kirsh, of course, the founder of Prime Media, the owners of this radio station many years ago now. and really playing an unbelievably foundational role in the idea, or just the very idea of independent commercial radio in South Africa. We'll find out more from Paul Nkuna, his memories, here from Jenny Chris Williams as well. Talking to Bronwyn Williams, we'll be talking about the book Expansive, A Guide to Thinking Bigger, Living Fuller, and Thriving in a Limitless World. Sounds like the world on a plate. We'll hear if it really is. And then Julia Finnis-Bedford is the founder of Amazing Spaces. Not just kind of your normal run-of-the-mill, this is a nice house, let's advertise it, let's sell it. We're talking about something that kind of Hollywood uses. We're talking about something like that. That's what we'll be talking about a little later from 7:30 this evening.
7:02.
7:02.
Stephen is on The Money Show. 6
to 8 p.m.
An interesting story in News 24, Fin24, this morning around ABSA, and confirmation that ABSA is now probing the leaking of that information that led to Ari Rautenbach eventually leaving early before his sort of time ended. And in a way, it's not an entire surprise that sort of internal meetings that were then leaked were then now are the subject of an investigation. If you think about it, if you're a bank and things from your, internal minutes of meetings, or not even that, but just what people were saying in meetings leaks, actually, you would probably expect an investigation. I did note, though, and this is where life can get a bit complicated for some people, I did notice that the bank said, and I understand why they say this, that the results of an investigation is being done by ENS, the law firm, that the results of the investigation will be kept secret, and they may not sort of legally allowed to release them. That's possibly true. I can't help but wonder if some shareholder somewhere is going to say, I absolutely need to know what the results were. I need to know who did what. I need to know what action was taken against the person who leaked, or something like that. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit more action on this. I think a lot more is going to happen on that story, but I found it just very, very interesting. Maybe you know a little bit more. Maybe you know a little bit more about potato chips and why you choose to go to the restaurant that you do. You heard the famous brand CEO just a few moments ago. 011 883 0702 021 446 0567.
7:02 with Stephen Grootes.
Email him on stephen@702.co.za.
Well, let's hear more from people who knew Issie Kirsh, the businessman who created the company Prime Media, owns this radio station. He was prepared to invest in something that no one else would during the apartheid era. And after starting at 702 in 1980, then turning it into a talk radio station, pioneering this format in South Africa, also operating from Botswana, homeland, an illegitimate homeland, essentially taking on the apartheid government. Someone who knew him as a business person was Paul Nkuna. He's the CEO of the Mine Workers Investment Company. He took over as chairman of Prime Media, in fact, from Issie Kirsh. Paul Nkuna, good evening. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to The Money Show.
Good evening, Stephen, and good evening to your 702 listeners.
When did you first meet Issie Kirsh?
I first met Issie Kirsh in 2000, but the relationship with Prime Media started in 1996 when the MIC invested in 94.7. And in the year 2000, we flipped our stake from 94.7 into Prime Media, and that is when I really came into contact with Issie. He was such a huge giant packed in a small package, man of honor and integrity. Oh, he was actually larger than life. There are so many things that I learned from Issie. Issie was somebody who enjoyed working behind the scenes. He never cared for limelight or publicity, and he was genuine in his all endeavors. There are two things that I always remember about Issie. One was his passion for CSI. He never did CSI because it was a legal requirement for the company to do. He did it out of passion. He did it out of good will. And he actually did it for the love of those who were less fortunate than him. I remember taking him to I can remember two of them. One was in Kwatema in Springs. It was a school for the handicapped kids. And he actually sponsored and assisted them in starting a vegetable gardening. The other school I actually went to with him was in Duduza. It was a school that wanted to start a computer library. And Issie was there to actually really assist them. He gave them all the assistance that was needed to actually really fulfill their function. In terms of transformation, and I'm actually proud to say it looks like Prime Media is still one of the best when it comes to transformation. When it comes to transformation, Issie did it because he truly wanted to empower those who were previously disadvantaged. And as MIC, we had a number of partners where we invested, and I don't think there's any that I can point out and say they were as passionate about transformation as he was. I remember, but I think Dan Moyane can attest to that, when Dan Moyane took over from Keith Gimri, Issie and I sat on the broadcasting board, and he was very, very supportive. And you could see that he was not a type of person who was actually doing it and giving you the impression that he's doing you a favor. He was doing it out of a good heart. And I always remember, I think he made me a better person when I was a chairperson of Prime Media. I think after a year or two, we were having coffee together in his office. And he said to me, you know, Paul, you do better. I said, what do you mean? He said, if you could stop acting like a principal, and when dealing with your board, you'll do a better job. And I never forget that, because he was he was a type of person who would point out your flaws without criticizing you, but you could tell that he was doing it with an intention of building you. We're going to meet Miss Issie, and actually the first thing that I ought to have said was to allow me to pass our condolences to the Kirsh family, especially William and his mother. We really feel their loss, because their loss is our loss as well. Up to today, I'm proud when I listen to 702. I only listen to 702 and no other station. All the black people who have actually really come up in the ranks, and all the blacks that have been actually appointed at 702, from management right up to the hosts, it's amazing. I think Issie did an amazing job. He led by example, and we're all going to miss him. He laid a very good foundation for Prime Media and its radio stations and all the other businesses. May his soul rest in peace.
Sure, Paul, it's an amazing tribute you've paid, and thank you. I mean, as a business person, you were running the Mine Workers Investment Company. You still are. You're investing money that doesn't belong to you. It belongs to miners. People have literally gone into the ground and brought things to the surface. And I've always thought that must place a very heavy burden on the shoulders of someone like you. And here you are dealing with someone like Issie Kirsh. What was he like? I mean, did you ever have to negotiate against each other?
I'll tell you, there's one thing that was outstanding about Issie and his leadership, and we actually picked up at Prime Media. Our negotiations with Prime Media was with a true intention to empower the Mine Workers Investment Company. We had a lot of other relationships with investee companies, but Issie and his team, actually our initial stake when we actually invested in Prime Media in 2000 was about 8%. And they facilitated it for us to actually increase it to 18% in 2005. And eventually at the time when I left Prime Media, the Mine Workers Investment Company had more than 26% economic interest at Prime Media. It was true empowerment and not done grudgingly. Our relationship with Issie Kirsh and his son William were very cordial. There was respect for one another. There wasn't a feeling that here you're in a relationship because this company is forced to have a black economic empowerment partner. Our partnership was a genuine one, and each time I actually spoke, Prime Media was one of my examples when in terms of actually talking about transformation in the true sense of the word. Transformation that was evolving without people trying to tick boxes. It was a true empowerment. He genuinely wanted to empower the Mine Workers Investment Company, and he did not make it to look like it was a favor or he had to do it because he is forced by legislation.
Paul Nkuna, sir, thank you very much indeed for your time. Really appreciate it on The Money Show. A very fulsome, very generous tribute to Issie Kirsh. Paul Nkuna is the CEO of the Mine Workers Investment Company. Issie Kirsh, the person who founded Radio 702, as it then was, and eventually Prime Media Broadcasting, and into the company that it is now. And in my view, creating the very idea of commercial talk radio, which simply was not something that anyone in South Africa was thinking of at the time. Paul Nkuna, thank you.
The Money Show.
Business books.
Well, this week's book is called Expansive, A Guide to Thinking Bigger, Living Fuller, and Thriving in a Limitless World. It's by John Sinai and Eric Kruger. Bronwyn Williams is the trend translator and future finance specialist at Flux Trends. Bronwyn, I don't mind a book that tries to sell itself through its title. I did wonder if maybe they'd overdone it on this one.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you got the joke there. Expansive is the title of the book, although the book is anything but expansive in at least the literal sense. It's a short read, 160 rather short pages made up of many, many little chapters, each of which is a kind of a bite-sized summary of the podcast episodes that the book is based on. And The Expansive is, of course, a well-known and quite popular podcast, especially with a certain sphere of the so-called manosphere, the South African version thereof anyway. It's definitely a hit, so it's got a target market, and the book is really the text version of this auditory phenomena.
And, I mean, does it actually change your life? You referenced the manosphere. There's a certain something there, I suspect, that you're saying. I mean, is it valuable? Let me put it like that.
Well, to a certain type of person it is, right? They're different sorts of people that have different sorts of markets. There's information buyers, people who buy information even though they don't ever plan on acting it, the sort of people that buy travel accounts or buy newsletters that tell you how to buy property or start a new life overseas. There are, of course, people who lap up motivational and self-help content, and this is really the target market they've got here. People who are interested in self-improvement, wants it in bite-sized chunks, are not prepared to read the whole book that each of the various ideas came from, right? But rather want just kind of the summary. And that's what they've kind of done here. Every single one of the chapters, there are a lot of chapters, I think something like 80 of them in the book, each based, let's say, on a podcast where they discuss the idea in a bit greater detail, gives you kind of like one activity, almost like a daily kind of a devotional book that certain circles were really popular with in the 80s and 90s. This gives you this one little thing that you can do today. And the tips are not new. They're certainly not new ideas, but they have all been collected into one place. And in theory, yes, if you take any of this advice seriously, yes, you probably will make some improvements in your life. But as with all these things, the power is in the doing, not in the telling. It's easy to give people advice like spend a few minutes breathing deeply or meditating or focus on things that you can improve, that you can do better, have better conversations with your clients, interrogate your assumptions and your biases, these sorts of things, all sort of common sense things that most of us know, probably most of us haven't done. It's like going to the gym or eating less and running more, like when it comes to looking after your physical body. When it comes to looking after your mental health and working on your personal success, in this case, largely looking at sort of physical and financial success, then sure, if you apply the sort of basic principles, your life could get better. And maybe this will be helpful to someone that doesn't know where to start or that needs a little bit of a nudge. But the chapters are light. They sort of really sketch out the basics of these ideas. They're not going to change your life in terms of giving you new information. But as I said, it all comes down to actually doing the work. And that's where the sort of proof comes in the pudding with these sorts of books. Do these gentlemen have the ability to actually encourage other people to do the job? Is their influence that influential? I think that's the real question here. Sometimes maybe a celebrity or a public figure can give you the nudge you need to get over the line. But again, as you said, this is very much targeted, I think, for the male of the species. As a woman, there's certainly certain things that made me raise an eyebrow. Like one of their tips was to ditch your regular dinner club group and to invite new people into the group, right? Because who would why? Because spending time or having at least 20 get-togethers with the same group of friends would be tediously boring. I don't know many women that would agree with that statement. Most of us have friendships that have lasted very happily in very tight-knit groups since we were little girls. Right? So, that sort of advice doesn't really translate, I think, across the gender divide. Maybe I'm slightly biased.
No, I know what you mean. Look, you get books like this that work and books like this that don't always work. Thanks very much indeed for that. That is Bronwyn Williams, the trend translator and future finance specialist at Flux Trends. The book is Expansive, A Guide to Thinking Bigger, Living Fuller and Thriving in a Limitless World. It's by John Sinai and Eric Kruger.
7:02. Stephen is on The Money Show.
6 to 8 p.m.
Let's continue our tributes to Issie Kirsh. You heard from Paul in Kuna a moment ago. You heard from John Robbie earlier in the show. Let's hear from Jenny Chris Williams. Played a big part in this radio station, particularly on 702 for many, many years. Jenny, I won't say for exactly how long. Good evening. It's wonderful to hear from you tonight. How will you remember Issie Kirsh?
Can I just say something? John Robbie was boasting about being on air for 30 years. Well, so was I. So I don't mind you talking about it at all. I'm so proud. And I've been in Cape Town at the Franschhoek Literary Festival and sort of a little bit divorced. And I was so dismayed when I saw the news of Issie Kirsh's death. And so my condolences to his wonderful wife, Misha, and, of course, to Willie and the other members of the family. They are an extraordinary family.
They really are. I mean, Issie Kirsh kind of seemed to have created something out of nothing with talk radio. No one was thinking about this in 1980 South Africa.
Well, it really started with John Burks because he went over to America and he loved it and he went into other studios and he was doing this and he was doing that. And he came back and I think it's fairly accurate. He went to Issie and he said, Issie, we've got to do talk radio. And I don't know how long the interval was between John Burks coming home and talking to Issie and talk radio actually starting. But it was only on for a few hours a day. And then it gradually got longer and longer until it was, full time.
And I mean, working in a company that was run by, at the start, owned by Issie Kirsh, I made the point earlier, he seemed to never interfere in the content. And that maybe was an important part of the company's DNA, still is, I think.
I think if you think of the times that Issie launched 702 and talk radio, and punching, 702 has always punched above its weight. And these were tumultuous times, the 80s and the 90s. And sometimes they were very frightening as well. I think that he was absolutely staunch. I think he was an incredibly courageous man. And I don't think anybody has mentioned the sense of family that the radio station had. It was smaller, of course, than the sort of the gargantuan station that it is today. And it was smaller and it was intimate and it was family. But Issie also had a dream, and his dream, once we started doing wonderful things on 702, and he could see how integrated his company was with the ideals of the new South Africa, he started thinking about Palestine, and he started thinking, I wonder whether we could get the Palestinians and the Israelis to talk to each other. Because if we've done it in South Africa, why can't we do it there? And I don't know how much money he spent. I mean, obviously that wasn't, part of my purview. But he opened a radio station in Palestine, and people were going across the border to and fro to do talk. John Burke, for a while, was stationed there, and I was always so sorry that it didn't work, because it was so brave and it was so, what is the word, so innocent, because he believed that if 702 could work, so could Palestine and Israel.
Ramallah FM, I think it was. Kalani Gwala worked there too for a time. Such an important memory, particularly at this moment. Jenny Chris-Williams, thank you. Wonderful to hear from you again. And really do stay strong. So good to hear from Jenny Chris-Williams, paying her tribute to Issie Kirsh this evening on The Money Show.
The Money Show
with Stephen Grootes, live on 92.7 and 106 FM. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app
and DSTV channel 856.
Well, imagine spending your days looking through and walking through the most amazing properties in the country. I'm not talking about your average pad in Houghton or Sandhurst. I'm talking about something at a slightly different level than that. So think, for example, of the home in Cape Town that your average Hollywood villain would be in. What would the dining room be that would make Elon Musk buy it? Think of it like that. Well, someone who does that every day is Julia Finnis-Bedford. She's the founder of very much a specialist sort of agency. It's called Amazing Spaces, and not so much just in the sort of buying and selling, but in the who uses it kind of market. And she's joining us now on The Money Show. Julia, good evening. It's lovely to meet you, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
You've been in this game for quite some time, and you started really looking for properties for Hollywood. How did it start?
So I was fortunate to be in the stills industry at the time, freelance producing. And in those days, and we turned 25 this year, there was no such thing as a location agency. And I saw a gap and was very lucky to be the first to start an agency in this country. But basically, we represent these incredible spaces to the film industry for shoots. And we protect the homeowner, but as well as providing the industry with this incredible selection of these locations, as you say, that are pretty amazing.
You began in Cape Town, right? I mean, that's where the film industry, when they first started filming in South Africa, when the international industry started filming in South Africa, that's kind of where it was, most of it.
Yeah, we have properties in Johannesburg, but we are primarily focused in Cape Town because, as you say, it's a very hot destination for international clients to come and shoot here.
Were you growing up surrounded by these homes? What kind of community were you growing up in? I mean, did that give you a working knowledge of what these places are like?
Oh, I was lucky that my parents were in hospitality and loved beautiful spaces. They actually started what's now called the Sellers Honort Hotel in Cape Town. And my dad always renovated homes, and Mum had really good style. So I think it was probably just in my blood that I had an appreciation for beautiful spaces.
I mean, I wouldn't know a beautiful space if it knocked me over the head with something. It's not something everybody has. I mean, you need to have an appreciation of something. I mean, my wife could probably have a much longer conversation with you than I could.
Yeah, I must say I do feel fortunate to have had that, as I say, in my upbringing. And I just have an incredible passion and also a knack just for seeing potential in spaces as well, because we also have a development division actually where I turn old ugly spaces into beautiful spaces, and I must say that's when I'm at my happiest. I find it incredibly exciting.
So the year 2000, I presume 25 years ago, you were starting this. There was a bit of a boom there was a boom in the global economy, there was a boom in the South African economy. Was there also a boom in the sort of Hollywood coming to film in Cape Town economy?
Yes, in fact, those first 10 years of business were absolute boom times in production. I mean, we were doing, 35, 40 shoots per day in those days. And, right up until sort of 2008, it was absolutely booming. And then with the global financial crash, things changed quite a bit. And then instead of the creatives making the decisions, the financial guys started making all the decisions. sadly. And so the industry took quite a knock. It has recovered, but never to those kind of levels, I must say.
What did the industry want here? I mean, obviously value was part of it, but what I'm really asking for, I suppose, is what kind of beautiful spaces were they looking for?
Well, the incredible thing about Cape Town in particular is we have a variation in architecture which you don't find many places in the world. So you can find Scandinavian-styled homes, what they call American-style bungalows, so single-story bungalows, beach houses, classic homes in the Constantia region that look like you're in the UK, France in the winelands. You can go out to the Atlantis dunes and it looks like you're in the desert. So, just the variation of spaces made it incredibly attractive to the foreigners because they can literally, produce any brief in one city. We even use the Cape Town, the Civic Centre and places like that to double as airports and so on. So that coupled with the incredibly professional crew, the weakening rand and post-production services just made it a great destination. And of course people love coming to Cape Town.
No, well, of course. I mean, I live in Joburg. I hear it all the time. I mean, that point about that there's probably enough variety in architecture to almost double for any other place. I mean, I remember an experience watching a movie with William H. Macy, following it very closely, set in the States, and suddenly seeing 3 people I'd worked with talking to him across the table in the movie. I mean, it sort of made my head explode. I mean, that's a really vital part. I'd never even thought about that. I mean, there are very few cities that have that kind of architectural variety.
Absolutely. And it's, as I say, we're incredibly fortunate that we have that and makes us and continues to put us on the center stage with regards to shooting abroad, with any of the countries shooting in our city.
When I think of a house, I kind of want to think of the room where I'm going to sleep. I kind of want to look at the bathroom, and I kind of want to look at the kitchen. When you enter a house for these clients, which rooms are the most important? What are you looking for?
Very often it's what we call the bones of the space. So is it, has it got high ceilings, wooden floors, great light? Kitchens are always good because very often there's a kitchen in a shoot, but it's more the bones of the space and big gardens, plenty of parking. So logistically, is it easy to shoot in? And funny enough, people always, send us pictures and say, well, look at my fantastic view of Table Mountain. And sadly, actually, they don't want a view of Table Mountain because, as we said, it needs to look like it's elsewhere in the world. But it's generally those ingredients: great light, good flooring, high ceilings, those kinds of things.
Is it the sort of entertainment area? I mean, maybe you have a better phrase for it, but is it the kind of dining room, the patio that sort of extends to the infinity pool that I imagine most of Cape Town lives in, that sort of matters?
Yes, all of those. But you'd be amazed what people ask for. We can have a shoot in a baby's room, or, they're wanting to shoot outside the front door because they're doing a car shoot, or even in the garage because they're doing a scene with father and son playing with the tools. And, it's a memorabilia type. So you can't believe what people ask for. We get all sorts of strange things. But so when we shoot the location, we will make sure we have photos of every single room, because if that brief comes up, we want to be sure that we can meet it.
I wanted to ask if the area in which the home matters, because, so often to set a scene, you'll see a sort of typical drone shot of it going over a property or something. And then I suddenly realized, well, they can use the exterior of one house and the interior of another.
Yes, that's exactly what they do. In fact, we call those establishing shots. So often they'll shoot a very fancy building or house, as you say, and then they can't secure the rights, or it's too expensive to shoot inside. And the inside of another location might actually suit them better. So very often what you see on the outside in your movie is not the same location as what they show on the inside.
So when you do this, are there specific properties that you sort of end up using again and again because they've got some sort of magic ingredient, and some maybe, sadly, whose owners are quite keen for a little bit of Hollywood cash, but actually it's just not working out so well?
Yes, sadly that is the case. We do have the ones that tend to work over and over. They just seem to have some special magic. I mean, one we've got in Constantia has been on our books, must be 20 years at least. And his garden just gets used year after year. And it's just one of those big, beautiful gardens with a lot of flat and open space on the lawn and a lot of beautiful trees around it. And that just seems to work every single time. So yes, there's a handful that work consistently, but also we won't take it on unless we really feel we can bring you work. Otherwise we're wasting your time and ours. And also we have clients who come year after year. So we really need to be offering them fresh stock when they come because they want to be seeing new spaces. So, which is great, of course, because if they keep coming back year after year and very often shooting for different clients, we always have new spaces for them to look at.
You started in 2000, and I sort of think of some of the movies that were big going into that area. So that would have set the scene when you started, and partly for my own narrow reasons, I keep thinking of some of the Bruce Willis thrillers and things like that. And now we're in a streaming era. So most of the movies that would have been filmed in your properties in 2000, almost all of them would have been seen for the first time on a big screen. Now, very few of them would be. Does that change what people are looking for in any way? I mean, I realize, a lot of our TVs are a very big screen, but a lot of us watch a lot of things on a phone as well. And I just wonder if that changes at all what people are looking for.
That's an interesting question. I don't think so that much. It's more like a budgetary thing. So, budgets are being squeezed. So that could affect, obviously, what locations become available to you within your budget. I mean, we have homes that are sort of worth over 100 million, that obviously aren't going to rent out their space for a small amount of money. But, it does beg the question with AI. We are wondering what that's going to look like in the future and how much will be created on AI. It's a question all of us have and nobody really has the answer. But you do wonder, will they create locations in AI? But part of me and a lot of my clients who I've asked this question to are saying, just like you want to buy your artisanal bread from the corner store and your homemade soup that you've always bought, there's going to be a real need for authentic and, genuine created material. So I think that people will still continue to always shoot on location. It's just that I think the face of that will change over time.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, there's a perfect kind of example of a movie that is a big budget but is on a small screen. It's on Amazon. It's called G20. It literally is an American president, not Trump, saving the G20. Was shot in Cape Town. I do wonder, when I was thinking about this interview, Julia, if maybe it played a small role in there somewhere.
Funny enough, I saw that movie. No, we actually didn't. Unfortunately, that one scene where you saw them driving along Signal Hill, that the location they then showed actually doesn't exist in Cape Town. So as you say, they shot various scenes to make you think they were here, but they actually weren't.
Interesting.
Sadly.
Yeah, well, very sad. When you look at you say some of these homes in Cape Town are 100 million rand. I can't think there are obviously some. How many like that do you think there are? I mean, are we looking at 100? Are we looking at more than that in Cape Town? I mean, some of them will be in Stellenbosch now as well.
Gosh, you'd be amazed at how much money is around. I mean, we see spaces all the time that we're blown away by. How many are over 100 million? I couldn't guess, but obviously on the Atlantic seaboard and Clifton side, there are a lot of them that are approaching those kind of numbers. We don't have them all available for shoots. Obviously, there's a certain appetite for having a shoot in your home. And, but, having said that, people often say to me, why would somebody with that kind of money have a shoot? They clearly don't need the money. But these are often very smart people who, reckon, well, why not? I've got an asset here whether I can turn into an income-producing asset and cover, rates bills or staff bills or, family holidays or whatever the case may be.
Are many of the people not living in the house full time?
Some. Most of ours are lived-in homes, but we do have some that are, what we call the swallows who live abroad or live in Johannesburg.
We're speaking to Julia Finnis-Bedford, the founder of Amazing Spaces tonight. She's telling you about her career, how she got into it, and what it's like. More, of course, on The Money Show in a moment.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Speaking to Julia Finnis-Bedford this evening, the founder of Amazing Spaces, finding really incredible properties, primarily for film shoots. Julia, you made the point that you always protect the property, you protect the owners of the property, and there's obviously a lot of sort of nitty-gritty to this, a lot of admin to it, and I imagine also, yes, you can film in my house, no, you can't go into that room, yes, you can go into that room. How important is that nitty-gritty?
Very important, because we obviously like to create some sustainability in the industry, and the only way we can do that is to keep those locations available for shoots for a long period of time. So, we need to respect that these are people's homes, and, some of them work from home, for example. You might say, well, to the film client, well, you can't go in the study. So, we make those rules very clear to any potential clients, and we also make sure that if anything happens on set, which does happen, occasionally there's damages or things like that, that we make sure it gets sorted afterwards. So that's how we look after the location owner and make sure for years to come that we're able to shoot in his home.
Do you have sort of a representative on site all the time, things like that? I imagine it would be impossible to do that all the time.
Yeah, we pop in on the shoot, but we have the professionals who are called either unit managers or location managers are on location all the time. And those people we've been working with for years and years. So we know exactly who they are. And, their job is there to look after locations. So we trust those people. And, as I say, they do their jobs well.
When you started in 2000, which countries were most of your clients coming from, and has that changed?
It hasn't changed much. It is a little bit seasonal because it depends on what's happening in that particular country's economy at the time. So we've had sort of boom years with the UK, for example, where that did drop off a bit. We had big clients in the early days that were catalogue clients, and catalogue has largely disappeared, literally producing huge catalogues of clothing. But generally, it's the UK and Europe are big clients for us, and then they're also, of course, coming from the US.
And that you don't see that necessarily changing. I mean, that still is, I think, really where most of the sort of Western world sort of content is created. I imagine it's going to stay like that, even possibly through AI.
Yes, I certainly hope so. And maybe, if Trump's silly tariffs don't take effect, as you say, that should continue.
Well, I was going to ask you about that, because I imagine for Cape Town it must be quite concerning. No one really knows what's going to happen. But what it really does is the uncertainty affects the whole film business. And I say this business in particular because it's so internationalized. I would imagine on one shoot you'll have people from 20 or 30 different countries at times.
Yeah, I mean, 80% of the work that we do is international. So yes, it's critical that we, keep that business flowing. But in terms of Trump, as you say, nobody really knows what that looks like and whether it's going to have a real effect on us. Very soon afterwards, his staff retracted that comment because the film industry in the US was saying, well, that doesn't help us. And, Netflix, for example, produce 80% of their content outside of the US. So, introducing tariffs on that, well, I mean, I don't think that serves the American public at all, and it certainly doesn't serve the American production companies. So, who knows? Who knows? At this stage, nobody knows what that looks like and whether it'll even come into effect. But, one's always keeping a careful eye on it.
You've been able to keep going for 25 years now. You employ people. You've created a sort of job for yourself and for others. Has anything really surprised you? Any particular demand, any particular experience, anything that actually you'd never thought this was possible, or you'd expected it to be one way and in fact it was another way? I mean, you've been in the business for a long time, bit of a pioneer in it. I don't know if you face any competition. But have there been any kind of moment where you thought, gosh, I'd never thought anyone would ask me that?
We've had a few, but a couple of the biggest notable shoots that we've had were ITV's Love Island, which is a reality series. I don't know if you've heard of it.
I have, yes, careful.
Yeah, but they, move on to location for 4.5 months and literally turn the place around that you can barely even recognize, the original home. Build inside walls, creating different rooms and so on. And even on their latest shoot, wanted to do some kind of outside activity where there was an orchard. So packed up, literally dug up the whole orchard, moved to the orchard. We had to preserve all the trees whilst they were shooting.
Wow.
And then replanted it afterwards. So they do crazy things, which you just think, and the budgets involved are quite scary.
That is unbelievable. Do you still enjoy it after all of this time?
Love it. Most recently, though, thanks to COVID, we obviously business shut down as it did for a lot of people, and not being able to host any international people coming into Cape Town was devastating for the business. But so we sort of thought, well, how can we leverage all these relationships and what can we do? And I thought, well, hang on, people are always going to be living in homes. So we then launched a real estate business under the same brand. And, for me, it was just all about property because I absolutely love property. And it was just a great extension to the business to then go into, high-end residential real estate.
Julia, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you. Julia Finnis-Bedford is the founder of Amazing Spaces.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by Absa Corporate and Investment Banking. Absa is a proud lead sponsor of B20 South Africa 2025.
Well, the President Cyril Ramaphosa just arriving now in the United States. And of course, that is going to dominate most of the week. A week which also includes a budget. We'll be back tomorrow. Good evening. It's 8 o'clock.